we're going to take a look at how the lower control arm is attached. I pushed it up, so that's kind of giving me access to these bolts that are here. There's a bracket on this side, so that bracket's not going to be allowed to turn. So I can just put a 5/8 inch socket on there and there and take those off. Now on the other side of the bracket here, that was this side I just showed you. Okay, that's the front side. The rear end, this is a 7/8 bolt here, and it goes through a bracket on the cross member, and on the top side it's a 13/16. So I'm just going to take and hit those with the impact wrench, and the lower control arm should be down. You may have noticed I've already got the 13/16 on that back nut on the top with my ratchet. So that nut's off. On these, I'm going to use a deep 5/8. Took the front one out first because if that bracket it was bolted into tries to spin, it's going to bump up against the frame on the cross member if I do the back one second. Lower control arm is off. Again, poly bushing's in good shape. I will make a mark on this so that I know which end is the top. And by that I mean the top of the arm that the control arm is connected to with the bushings, not the control arm itself. That's kind of obvious, I think, how that goes. Okay, two things to update on. The driver's side lower control arm is off, and this is what I was talking about when I said I wanted to do this side first, so that when the torque of trying to loosen it moved this, it moved it up against the cross member and it held it for me rather than coming this way. So on the driver's side, it still ended up being the one that's on the right if you're facing the car. So the other update is I don't have to mark these as to top and bottom because there's a GM part number stamped right here on this connection, and that goes up towards the chassis where it's connected. We're looking at the lower control arm. I will end up taking this rubber bumper off when I go to de-rust and paint it, and these aftermarket ball joints here, there's two nuts. This is a nut back here. It's also a stop, but it's got a hex place on it so you can get a socket on it. And then there's a nut inside, and there's one in the front as well that goes through, and there's a nut and there's a bolt on the top. These things are not pressed in or anything. There might be some minor rust holding it in if it's been old, but once you get that off, if they're aftermarket, it pops that right out. The two places where there are nuts here. If it's an original equipment, those are rivets and you have to grind them or drill them, or otherwise, chisel the head off and punch them out in order to get the ball joint out. Now this one thing I noticed is kind of counterintuitive when you look at it. The back mount, the bolt goes down through, there's a washer on top of the cross-member bracket, and then the nut goes on from the bottom. On the other side, the bolts go up from the bottom, and there's a lock washer under the head of the bolt. And this sits on top of the cross-member. Just wanted to record that so that I know when it goes back in exactly how it goes. With the lower control arms off now, the front end of the frame is basically naked. It's all we're going to take off. Like I've been saying all along, I put the bolts in where they belong just so I know where they go. They'll have to come out when I paint it, but in the process of de-rusting and that, they can stay there really, because as long as I can get behind them to de-rust the frame, I don't have a problem with them getting de-rusted a bit. I'm going to do them anyways. So now it is on to the rear end.